بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. So our lecture today is titled The 12 Pens Which Arrange the Affairs of the World. And this is really based upon a passage in a book by Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, which is titled At-Tibyan في أيمان القرآن. التبيان في أيمان القرآن. It also has another title, التبيان في أقسام القرآن. And this book is an amazing book. In it, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he discusses all of the oaths or the things that Allah Azza wa Jal, he swears by in the Quran. And he comments upon them and explains the nature and the angle and the benefits of all of those oaths or the things that Allah swears by in the Quran. It's an amazing book. And so in one of those chapters, Ibn al-Qayyim discusses the beginning of Surah Al-Qalam, the pen. And what we're going to do inshallah ta'ala in this lesson is to just read, because his words are amazing in and of themselves. We'll try to read as much of it as we can. But before we go into the speech of Ibn al-Qayyim, we'll begin with the speech of Sheikh Abdul Rahman bin Nasir as-Sa'di rahimahullah ta'ala, who introduces us to this topic. So the Sheikh, he says in his tafsir of Surah Al-Qalam, beginning first of all with the speech of Allah Azza wa Jal, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم نون والقلم وما يسطرون ما أنت بنعمة ربك بمجنون وإن لك لأجرا غير ممنون وإنك لعلى خلق عظيم فستبصر ويبصرون بأيكم المفتون إن ربك هو أعلم بمن ضل عن سبيله وَهُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِالْمُحْتَدِينَ. So on these opening 7 or 8 verses, Shaykh As-Sa'di, he begins by saying, يُقْسِمُ تَعَالَى بِالْقَلَمِ وَهُوَ اسم جنس شامل للأقلام التي تكتب بها أنواع العلوم ويسطر بها المنثور والمنظوم وذلك أن القلم وما يسطر به من أنواع الكلام من آياته العظيمة التي تستحق أن يقسم بها على براءة نبيه محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم مما نسبه إليه أعداؤه من الجنون فنفى عنه ذلك بنعمة ربه عليه وإحسانه حيث من عليه بالعقل الكامل والرأي الجزل والكلام الفصل الذي هو أحسن ما جرت به الأقلام وسطره الأنام وهذا هو السعادة في الدنيا. So he begins by saying that in this surah, Allah Azza wa Jal, he swears by the qalam. He swears by the qalam, al-qalam. And here the word al-qalam is ismu jinsin. It's used to refer to all pens, because it refers to the category of pens. So it brings together, or underneath it are all of the pens by which all of the sciences are written. So this is what Allah Azza wa Jal is swearing by. Whether it is the normal speech, whether it is poetic speech, no matter what type of speech, all the various sciences, all the types of speech, all of that comes under the ismu jins, which is the name for the category of the pen. And the pen, this pen and whatever it writes, whatever is written by the pen, from all types of speech, this is from the amazing signs, the mighty signs of Allah Azza wa Jal. And because it is something mighty in and of itself, as we shall see inshallah ta'ala with the elaboration of Ibn al-Qayyim, it is something which deserves to be sworn by. The pen itself, the instrument of the pen, and what results from the pen, of the sciences and everything else that we will discuss, it is a sign, a mighty sign, and it deserves to be sworn by in order to establish that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is free and innocent of whatever his enemies ascribe to him. Because they said that he is a mad person. As Allah Azza wa Jal, He negates that in the next ayah. He says, you, by the favor of your Lord, you are not mad, you are not majnoon. So he swore by the qalam. He began by the letter noon, and then the qalam, by the pen. And then he said that you are not, by the favor of your Lord, you are not mad. So Allah Azza wa Jal, He negated from the Messenger of Allah that he is mad. Rather, we see that Allah Azza wa Jal gave to the Messenger the perfect, complete intellect, al-aqlul kamil. And He gave him the opinion, which is the greatest, most valued opinion. And He gave him speech which is decisive and clear. And so in contrast to what the enemy said, that he is mad, Allah Azza wa Jal is affirming the opposite, negating that he is mad. And this implies that he has aql, intellect, ra'i, opinion, view and speech, all of which are decisive, complete, perfect. And so this speech that the Messenger of Allah was given, and this opinion, and this aql, this intellect, all of that together, what resulted from it, meaning the Quran and the Sunnah, the guidance, that is the best that the pen has written, that any pen has written. And with this, Allah Azza wa Jal is affirming for the Messenger of Allah the happiness of the life of this world. Then in the next ayah, so in this ayah, He established the goodness in this world in the sense that you are not mad, you have perfect intellect, you have decisive speech, you have valued opinion. In the next ayah, He then established for him the benefit and the happiness of the hereafter. So this ayah is the happiness of this world, and the next ayah, وَإِنَّ لَكَ لَأَجْرًا غَيْرَ مَمْنُونَ. He established for him the sa'adah in the hereafter. So in other words, this means that you have a great and mighty reward. This reward will never end. It is continuous. And this reward is for whatever the Messenger ﷺ he left of righteous deeds and perfect manners and morals and complete guidance which guides to every single goodness. So in the hereafter he will have an unending reward. In this life he is the perfect man, the perfect intellect, the perfect speech, the perfect opinion, in every respect the perfect guidance. And in the hereafter he will have the complete, most complete, unending of rewards. Why? Because of what he left as a consequence of his guidance. And then he said that he continued and he went on in the verse that followed, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَىٰ خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ, that indeed you are upon a mighty set of morals, khuluq, or manners, or a model of behavior, that you are aliyun bihi musta'lin bi khuluqik, that you are raised and lofty by way of these manners that Allah bestowed upon you, these characters and these manners that Allah bestowed upon you. And these manners were explained by his wife Aisha radiyallahu anha when she was asked, and she replied, كَانَ خُلُقُهُ الْقُرْآنِ, that his manners were the Qur'an. All of his manners were the Qur'an. And the Shaykh goes on to explain certain manners or characteristics which are commanded in the Qur'an by way of example, خُذِ الْعَفْوَ وَأْمُرْ بِالْعُرْفِ وَأَعْرِضْ عَنِ الْجَاهِلِينَ. Hold on to forgiveness and command that which is good and turn away from the ignorant. Also from the examples he gives, فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. It is only by the mercy of Allah that you were lenient and gentle towards them. In another ayah, لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ عَزِيزٌ عَلَيْهِ مَا عَنِتُّمْ. That there has come to you a messenger from yourselves, it grieves him that you should suffer harm. These are just some of the examples given by the Shaykh to illustrate the kinds of morals, the kinds of qualities, the kinds of virtues that the Quran commands and which were brought out in the Messenger of Allah ﷺ in the most perfect of ways. And then the Shaykh goes on to explain that all of these ayat in the Quran which speak of khuluq, of the manners, and which enjoin these types of manners, they are from the ayat, the signs of Allah, which indicate and prove that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ is described with them. And these ayat, they encourage these beautiful characteristics. And so the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, he was the peak and the pinnacle of all of these characteristics. And then the Shaykh goes on to give numerous qualities that he had. So for example, فَكَانَ سَهْلًا لَيِّنًا قَرِيبًا مِنَ النَّاسِ. He was gentle, soft, and always close to the people. And he says, مُجِيبًا لِدَعْوَةِ مَنْ دَعَاهُ. He would always respond to anyone who invited him. قَاضِيًا لِحَاجَةِ مَنْ اسْتِقْضَاهُ. And he would fulfill the need of anyone who requested from him. جَابِرًا لِقَلْبِ مَنْ سَأَلَهُ. He would, anyone who came and had a need and asked him for some material thing, he would mend his heart and give him what he wanted. And لَا يُحْرِمُهُ وَلَا يَرُدُّهُ خَائِبًا. He would never send him empty-handed, nor prevent anything from him. Whenever his companions wanted something from him, or they wanted some affair from him to discuss something, then he would agree with them and follow them in it, as long as it did not have anything which was mahdhur, something that, in which caution needs to be taken. If he was resolute on an affair, if he decided to pursue something, he would not just hold it by himself and take the sole authority. Rather, he would consult them. He would consult the Sahaba. And he would involve them in it. And likewise, he would accept anything who was a muhsin amongst them. He would pardon anyone who was a musi, who would do wrong. And he would never keep company with anyone except in the most complete and the most perfect and the most benevolent of company. And he would never frown in the face of any one of them, nor would he be harsh in his speech, nor would he hold anyone to account, as in someone genuinely made a mistake with his speech. He would not hold on to that, nor would he take hold of things where people fell on account of slips, but rather he would show the greatest of benevolence towards them. And so all of these are examples that the Shaykh gives of the beautiful morals and the manners and the akhlaq, the etiquette of the Messenger of Allah. And then he says, since Allah Azza wa Jal, He gave him the loftiest of positions of any man, then the enemies, his enemies, would ascribe to him that he is mad, he is majnoon, he is maftoon. So in other words, Allah Azza wa Jal placed the Messenger of Allah in the loftiest of positions. And in contrast, the mushrikun, the kafirun, they ascribed him with these things, that he is majnoon, he is maftoon. And so in response, Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, giving strength to His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, فَسَتُبْصِرُ وَيُبْصِرُونَ. You shall soon see, and they will soon see. بِأَيِّكُمُ الْمَفْتُونَ. Which of you two is actually maftoon, is the one who is put to trial? And it has already become clear, the Shaykh says, it became clear that he is the most guided of people, the most perfect of them, in this guidance, and that his enemies were the most misguided of people and the most evil of people, and that they are the ones who put the people to trial. They're the ones who put the servants of Allah to trial. They misguided them from his path. And sufficient is it that Allah Azza wa Jal, He knows, He is the one who knows, and He is the one who is al-muhasib, He will call them to account, and He is the one who will recompense them. And this is what we see in the next verse, in which Allah Azza wa Jal, He said, Inna rabbaka huwa a'lamu biman dhalla an sabilih, wa huwa a'lamu bil muhtadin. That indeed your Lord knows who is misguided from his path and who is from those who seek guidance. So this opening commentary from Shaykh As-Sa'di gives us a general meaning of this passage and the general basic meanings of this passage. And so we'll move now to the speech of Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala. And so this is in the printed book, page 299 onwards. It runs for about 20 pages. So inshallah ta'ala, we will try our best to read as much of this as we are able. So he begins, وَمِن ذَلِكَ قَوْلُهُ تَعَالَى نُونَ وَالْقَلَمِ وَمَا يَسْطُرُونَ مَا أَنْتَ بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ بِمَجْنُونَ. So he mentions the ayat at the beginning, Noon, by the pen and by what they write. You, by the favor of your Lord, you are not majnoon, you are not mad. Ibn al-Qayyim says that which is correct is that the Noon, as-Sahih, an-Noon, wa-Qaf, wa-Sad, all of these letters are from the letters of the alphabet by which Allah Azza wa Jal, He begins certain surahs of the Quran. And when we look at these letters in all of these various verses, we see that they are uhadiyya, wa thuna'iyya, wa thulathiyya, wa ruba'iyya, wa khumasiyya. That they are either one letter, or two letters, or three letters, or four letters, or five letters. They never go beyond 5 letters. And these words are never mentioned in any surah, except that immediately afterwards the Quran is mentioned. So never are these letters mentioned at the beginning of any surah, except that the Quran is mentioned shortly after, either immediately afterwards, or the next verse, or at the beginning. Except in 2 surahs. There are 2 exceptions. And that is Surah Qaf Ha Ya Ain Sad, which is Surah Maryam, Surah 19, and Surah Noon, which is the Surah Al-Qalam, which we are discussing here. And then Ibn al-Qayyim goes on to mention some of the surahs in the Quran. So he mentions Surah Al-Baqarah, Alif Lam Mim, Dhalika al-Kitab. He mentions Surah Al-Imran, Alif Lam Mim, Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum, nazzala alayka al-kitab bil-haqq. So he mentions the book, Alif Lam Mim Sad, Kitabun unzila ilayk. Once again in Surah Al-A'raf, Alif Lam Mim Ra, Tilka ayatul kitab. Again in Surah Ar-Ra'd, and so on and so on and so forth. Now, Ibn al-Qayyim goes on to explain that these letters which are used at the beginning of these surahs, this is Allah notifying us of the nobility of these letters. The nobility, the sharaf of these letters, and how great they are, how great their status is, their rank is, and their loftiness. Why? Because they are the foundations of His speech. The Quran is made up of these letters. And His books, by which Allah Azza wa Jal, He spoke His books by way of these letters. He revealed them to His messengers, and He guided by way of these letters His servants. So these are the very letters by which all of these affairs are established. He informed His servants by way of these letters, by way of these very letters. Allah Azza wa Jal, He informed His servants about Himself, His names, His attributes, His actions, His command, His prohibition, His promise, His threat. He notified them by way of these very letters of that which is al-khair, good, al-shar, evil, al-hasan, that which is good and wholesome, al-qabih, that which is vile and repugnant. And He enabled them, likewise He enabled them to actually speak with these very letters, in the sense that they are able to express the meanings which they hold in their souls or in their hearts. They are able to express them in the simplest of ways. These are things that we don't really reflect upon. These are from the great favors and bounties of Allah Azza wa Jal that we take for granted. We don't reflect upon these signs, that we are able to express meanings, feelings that we have in the innermost parts of our hearts and souls. We are able to express them in the simplest of ways and in the easiest of paths without any difficulty. And we are able to convey these meanings. This itself is from the greatest of the signs of Allah Azza wa Jal. The sign of speech, of bayan. Allah Azza wa Jal in the Quran, He rebuked and He criticized the one who worshipped a deity which does not speak. وَلِهَذَا عَابَ سُبْحَانَهُ عَلَى مَنْ عَبَدَ إِلَهًا لَا يَتَكَلَّمُ. And He explained His favor upon His servants in that He allowed them, He gave them the ability to speak with kalam, with speech. And so therefore, when He mentions these huruf at the beginning of these surahs, then all of this is notifying His servants of the perfection in His rububiyyah and the perfection of His benevolence towards them and His favor upon them. And so therefore, these huruf, these letters, they are more worthy that they should be sworn by, as we see in the beginning of these surahs, than the night or the day or the sun or the moon or the heaven or the stars, because these are things that we see that Allah Azza wa Jal, He swears by them in the Quran. But the letters here, Ibn al-Qayyim is pointing out that they are more worthy because of the fact that by way of these letters Allah spoke His books. He revealed His books. And by way of these letters He enabled His servants to speak, by which they are able to convey that which is in their souls. These are from the great and mighty signs of Allah Azza wa Jal. And so therefore, these huruf, they indicate in the most clearest of ways, فَهِيَ ضَالَّةٌ أَظْهَرَ ضَلَالَةٍ عَلَى وَحْدَانِيَّتِهِ وَقُدْرَتِهِ وَحِكْمَتِهِ وَكَمَالِهِ وَكَلَامِهِ وَصِدْقِ رُسُلِهِ. These huruf, they explain in the clearest of ways His oneness, His power, His wisdom, His perfection, His speech, and that His messengers were truthful. And then He goes on to explain that Allah Azza wa Jal, He's actually combined between these two things. The Quran, which is made up of the huruf, and the speech of man, the bayan of man, which are also made of huruf. He combined these two in a single place in the Quran, which is Surah Ar-Rahman at the beginning. He said, Ibn al-Qayyim, وَقَدْ جَمَعَ سُبْحَانَهُ بَيْنَ الْأَمْرَيْنِ أعني القرآن والنطق الإنسان وجعل تعليمهما من تمام نعمته وامتنانه كما قال تعالى الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. Ar-Rahman, so he says that Allah Azza wa Jal has brought these two affairs together, I mean the Quran and man's ability to speak. And He made His teaching of these two things, meaning Allah teaching the Quran and Allah teaching man bayan, speech, He made this to be from His favor. As He said, and He mentioned Surah Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahman, the most gracious, He taught the Quran, He created man, and He taught him speech. So we have Allama al-Quran, and we have also Allamahu al-Bayan. So by way of these huruf, Ibn al-Qayyim says, he mentions a list of things. فَبِهَذِهِ الْحُرُوفِ عَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنِ. He mentions 10 things altogether here. So by way of these huruf, what did he do? Number one, allama al-Qur'an. وَبِهَا علم البيان. By way of them, he taught man discourse, speech. وَبِهَا فَضَّلَ الْإِنسَانِ عَلَى سَائِرِ أَنْوَاعِ الْحَيَوَانِ. By way of these speech, these huruf that we speak, he favored man over all other animals. No other animal can speak with these letters of the alphabet like we do. They cannot speak meanings and concepts like we do. This is a nobility that Allah Azza wa Jal has given to man. وَبِهَا أَنزَلَ كُتُبَهُ. By way of these huruf, he revealed his book. He sent his books down. وَبِهَا أَرْسَلَ رُسُلَهُ. With these huruf, he sent his messengers. وَبِهَا جُمِعَتِ الْعُلُومُ وَحُفِظَتْ. And by way of these huruf, we see all of the sciences, whether we are speaking of the sciences of the religion or the sciences, they have been preserved. وَبِهَا انتظمت مصالح العباد في المعاش والمعاد. By way of these huruf, we see that the beneficial interests of mankind, they have been arranged and organized by way of letters and speech. وَبِهَا تَمَيَّزَ الْحَقُّ مِنَ الْبَاطِلِ. By way of them, the truth has been distinguished from the falsehood. وَالصَّحِيحُ مِنَ الْفَاسِدِ. And that which is sound and correct from that which is corrupt. وَبِهَا جُمِعَتْ أَشْتَاتُ الْعُلُومِ. And by way of them, all of the various sciences have been gathered together. And by way of these huruf, it is possible to convey these sciences between the minds. Right? So by way of these huruf, we are able to speak to each other about different sciences and convey them to each other's minds. So after mentioning these benefits, he then says, how many benefits have been brought about by way of these huruf? How many retributions have been repelled by way of these huruf? How many slips have been overlooked by way of these huruf? How many sanctities have been established by way of these huruf? How many have been guided from those who are misguided? How much of the truth has been established by way of them? And how much falsehood has been demolished by way of them? So all of this, still continuing, speaking about the huruf, the letters, the power in these letters, and the benefits in these letters, and how many things that we see around us are brought about by way of these letters. So then he goes on and he says that Allah Azza wa Jal, teaching man bayan, teaching us just letters and the ability to speak, Allah's signs in that respect are the same as Allah creating man. So the wonders that we see in our creation are similar to the wonders that we see in our ability to speak in bayan. He then goes on to say, فَسُبْحَانَ مَنْ هَذَا صُنْعُهُ فِي هَوَاءٍ يَخْرُجُ مِنْ قَصَبَةِ الرِّئَةِ. He says, how free is Allah, how perfect is Allah, the one who, this is His creation. He brings out air from the lungs. This is just air coming from the lungs. It then gathers together at the bottom of the throat. Then it comes to the backmost part of the throat. And then it comes to the middle part, to the end of it, to the highest part. It comes to the tongue, to the middle of the tongue, to the sides. Then it comes to the gums at the beginning, to the lips, and then through the nose. And out of all of this, we hear a specific sound depending on which part it emanates from. And all of these bring out the huruf. Allahu Akbar. All of this just from air, emanating from the lungs. And these little pieces of sound are brought together from different parts of the mouth. 28 different sounds are brought out in pieces. They are huruf. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He inspired man. فَأَلْهَمَ سُبْحَانَهُ الْإِنسَانِ نَظْمَ بَعْدِهَا إِلَى بَعْدٍ. He then inspired, and this is why we say that language is inspired by Allah Azza wa Jal. It is taught by Allah Azza wa Jal by inspiration. There's no such thing as evolution of This is batil. Rather, Allah Azza wa Jal, He inspired man. He created man. He inspired in him this ability to speak with language. So He inspired him to start arranging these huruf next to each other. فَإِذَا هِيَ كَلِمَاتٌ قَائِمَةٌ بِنَفْسِهَا. Then they become words. Then He inspired him to combine these words together. And then here we see that they now become speech which indicates meanings. Amran, a command, wa nahyan, a prohibition, wa khabran, information, wa istikhbaran, an inquiry, wa nafyan, a negation, wa ithbatan, an affirmation, wa iqraran, wa inkaran, wa tasdiqan, wa takdhiban, wa ijaban, wa istihbaban, wa su'alan, wa jawaban. All of these are different types of speech. Questions, answers, negations, affirmations, corroborations, inquiries, and so on and so forth, belief, disbelief. All of these are different types of speech. And this discourse, al-khitab, it can be poetic, it can be a nazm, arranged, it can be brief, it can be long, and it can be in all sorts of different languages. All of this, كل ذلك صنعته تبارك وتعالى في هواء مجرد خارج من باطن الإنسان إلى ظاهره. All of this is just from air which comes from the in part of a human, and it comes out of his, it comes outward. And so all of this has been prepared in such a way that when the voice, when the air comes out, it is cut into relevant pieces depending on how it comes out, and then it is then composed in the way that we described. فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ وَأَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ فَهَذَا شَأْنُ الْحَرْفِ الْمَخْلُوقِ. So all of this is the affair of the harf that we speak, which is created, because we are created. This is our huruf. And as for the harf, as for that harf by which the creation is brought about, then this is a'la wa ajal. Then this is loftier and mighty. Meaning this is the speech of Allah Azza wa Jal. When Allah speaks and He brings about the creation by way of it. So, the Shaykh says, Ibn al-Qayyim, that if this is the nature of the huruf, if this is the reality of these letters, then it is befitting that the surahs of the Quran are opened by way of them. That the passages of the Quran are opened by way of them. And that because they indicate, they are signs of the rububiyyah of Allah Azza wa Jal. They are evidences of Allah's oneness, His wahdaniyah. And they are indicative of the perfection of His power, and the perfection of His knowledge, and His wisdom, and His mercy, and the fact that He is concerned with His creation, He cares for His creation, that He is gentle with them, and that He is benevolent towards them. And then he says that if you were to treat these letters and give them their due right, then what you would do is that you would use these letters as evidence for the creation and the resurrection, as evidence for the tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal and for the messengers that He sent. Because these letters, now notice what he's doing here, he's basically showing to us, because there are two ways that we can find evidence. We can look in the creation, we can see the signs of Allah Azza wa Jal which are seen, we can reflect upon them, and by way of them we can come to the conclusion that yes, there is a resurrection. Yes, there is a Lord. Yes, there is a Lord who reveals books and sends messengers. This is one way. We can use the ayat which are seen or observed. And here Ibn al-Qayyim is saying that if we were to reflect upon the nature of these letters, these huruf which are in his book, and the nature of these huruf in, whether he taught the Quran or whether he inspired them in man, and whoever gives these huruf their true status and reflects upon them, then really he will use the huruf, the letters, these letters of the Quran, he will use them as a basis to find evidence for the creation and the resurrection and Allah's creation and command and His tawheed and His sending of messengers. In other words, these words themselves, miraculous in and of themselves, are the clearest proof for all of these things. These huruf which are masmu'ah, which are heard, they are the most clear and evidential of proofs to prove all of these things. فهي من أظهر أدلة شهادة أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله. These huruf are the clearest of evidences, the clearest of witness that there is none which has the right to be worshipped except Allah, and that Muhammad is the slave and messenger of Allah. وأن القرآن كلام الله تكلم به حقا, and that the Quran is the speech of Allah, that He spoke it in truth. He sent it to His messenger as revelation. He conveyed it just as it been revealed to him out of truthfulness. So let not one of you neglect reflecting upon every single surah which begins with these letters and which comprises these signs and these objectives. وَبِاللَّهِ التَّوْفِيقِ. So all of this is speech about the nature of these letters, and this is his commentary upon Noon. This takes us to the next part of the surah. Then he says, then Allah Azza wa Jal, He swore bil-qalami, thumma aqsama subhanahu bil-qalam, wal-qalami wama yasturun. So He swore by the book and by the instrument by way of which the book comes to be, which is the qalam. So Noon, when He said Noon, we said that this is an indication of the letters upon which the book of Allah Azza wa Jal is expressed. So that's an indication of the book. The letter Noon is an indication of the book, meaning the Quran. And then he mentioned the qalam, and the qalam is the instrument by which the book was written. And it is one of His signs, and it is the first of His creations by which His qadr and His legislation was established, by which the wahi was written, by which the religion was established, by which the sharia was established, and by which all of the sciences were preserved, and by which the beneficial interests of the slaves were established. And so by way of this pen, He guaranteed ownership of wealth and property. By way of this pen, security was decreed for the ways and the pathways. And so he mentions about some of the consequences of this pen, meaning this pen which wrote the qadr. This is what he's speaking of. And then he goes on to explain that this qalam, this pen, is the pen in general now is something which is it's a tongue, it's a hidden tongue. And what it does is it writes down, it inscribes those meanings, and those meanings become concrete. And he says, just as the tongue is an expression of the heart, then likewise the pen is the expression of the tongue. And this pen, it brings about the letters that we normally hear, it puts them down, and it inscribes them down. And so the pen is really something that expresses from the heart. The pen is a messenger of the heart. The pen is a translator of the heart. The pen is the tongue of the heart. It is the silent tongue of the heart. وَلِسَانُهُ الصَّامِتُ. So he says the pen is the silent tongue of the heart. Now, after he established everything we've discussed so far, Noon indicating the Quran, indicating letters, the sign of Allah, which are the letters that we need to reflect upon, and then he goes on to that by mentioning the qalam. Then he says the pens wal aqlam mutafawitun fil rutab. Not all pens are the same. So now he goes on to mention the different types of pen which exist in the creation. And the first of them he says, وَأَعْلَاهَا وَأَجَلُّهَا قَدْرًا قَلَمُ الْقَدَرِ السَّابِقِ. The first pen, the greatest pen, the loftiest of them all in rank and status, is the pen of Al-Qadr As-Sabiq, the pen which wrote the pre-decree, by which Allah, He wrote the maqadir, the decrees of the creation, as we see in the hadith in Sunan Abi Dawood from Ubadah bin As-Samit radiyallahu anhu. قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول إن أول ما خلق الله القلم فقال له اكتب قال يا ربي وما أكتب قال اكتب مقادير كل شيء حتى تقوم الساعة. So he said, indeed, the first that Allah created, when Allah first created the pen, He said to it, write. And it said, "O my Lord, what shall I write?" He said, write the decrees of everything until the establishment of the hour. Here Ibn al-Qayyim discusses the issue of whether the pen was created first or the throne was created first. This is a well-known issue discussed by the scholars, and that which is most correct in light of the evidences is that the arsh, the throne, was created before the pen. And this is because of what is established in the Sahih of Al-Bukhari from the hadith of Abdullah bin Amr, who said that the Messenger of Allah, he said, قدر الله مقادير الخلائق قبل أن يخلق السماوات والأرض ب50 ألف سنة وعرشه على الماء. That Allah decreed the decrees of the creation before He created the heavens and the earth by 50,000 years, whilst His throne was above the water. So this is a clear evidence that the throne was already present, and thereafter Allah wrote the decrees by way of the pen. Ibn al-Qayyim says, فَهَذَا صَرِيحٌ فِي أَنَّ التَّقْدِيرِ وَقَعَ بَعْدْ خَلْقِ الْعَرْشِ. This is explicit in that the decrees were written after the creation of the throne. Then Ibn al-Qayyim, he discusses a linguistic issue about this, the text of this hadith. He says that this hadith, we can read it in two ways. We can either treat it as one sentence or two sentences. Inna awwala ma khalaqa Allahu al-qalama. So depending on which way we read the hadith, the meaning will change. So in the first instance, Inna awwala ma khalaqa Allahu al-qalama, where we have the awwala is mansoob and the qalam is mansoob. This meaning would be that when Allah first created the pen, or as soon as He created the pen, He said to it, write the decrees. So in other words, this does not mean that the first thing created was the pen, if we read it in that way. Rather, it means that when Allah first created the pen, He said to it. So that's the reading when we read the word awwal and qalam, which are mansoob. And as for if we read them with ar-rafa', which is the second way of reading the sentence, he says then all that would mean that the first that Allah created was the pen. But then the interpretation of that would be meaning from this universe. So from this creation, the first thing that Allah created was the pen. So either of these two ways, we would have basically the same meaning. So this is a technical discussion that Ibn al-Qayyim discusses about the hadith itself and the interpretation of the hadith based upon the i'rab of the actual words. So this now leads us to the second pen. So the first pen is the pen of Al-Qadar. This is the greatest and the mightiest of pens. The second pen that he discusses, Al-Qalam al-Thani, Qalam al-Wahi. وهو الذي يكتب به وحي الله عز وجل إلى أنبيائه ورسله. The second pen is the pen of revelation. With this pen, the revelation of Allah, the wahi of Allah, is written to His prophets and to His messengers. And those who write this revelation, and this is a reference here to the angels, they are the ones who preside over the universe or the world. And all of the pens that are in the creation are subservient to their pens. Then he mentions how the Messenger of Allah, he was raised on the Laylatul Isra to a level where he could actually hear the screeching of the pens. And he says, these are the pens which write whatever Allah Azza wa Jal He inspires to them, meaning through the angels, from the affairs which regulate the affairs of the world, both the higher part of the world and the lower part of the world. So this now is the second pen, the pens of revelation. The third type of pen is, he says, وَالْقَلَمُ الثَّالِث قَلَمُ التَّوْقِيعِ عَنِ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ وَهُوَ قَلَمُ الْفُقَهَاءِ وَالْمُفْتِينَ. So this now is the third type of pen. This pen is the pen of the jurist, of the scholar, of the faqih, of the mufti, the one who gives fatwa. This qalam, he says, likewise, it is a decisive pen. To this pen returns back the issues of blood and wealth and al-furuj, meaning the relations, marital relations, and al-huquq, meaning the rights. So in other words, the fuqaha, the ulama, the muftis who give judgment in issues that deal with the rights of people, the wealth of people, and the issues of dealing with blood and so on and so forth, they are basically informing, they are conveying by way of their pen the hukum of Allah Azza wa Jal, the ruling of Allah Azza wa Jal between His servants. And so the people who possess this pen, they are likewise, they are the rulers of this earth of all other pens. All other pens are subservient to their pens. So keep this in the train of thought in your mind. We have the pen of Al-Qadr. The pen of Al-Qadr. Then we have the second pen, which is the pen of the angels who write the revelation that will be sent to the messengers. So their pens, they govern everything that will, in relation to the world. Then we have the pen of those who inform of the ruling of Allah Azza wa Jal, the scholars, the muftis, the fuqaha. All other pens are subservient to them. And then he says, the fourth pen, قلم طب الأبدان قلم طب الأبدان التي تحفظ بها صحتها الموجودة وترد إليها به صحتها المفقودة. He says this next pen is the pen of the treatment of the bodies. طب الأبدان, the health or the medicinal treatment of the bodies, the pen by which the health that they already have is preserved, and by which the health which they have lost is returned to them. And by way of this pen, harms and things which conflict with their health are repelled and removed from them. He says, this pen, وَهَذَا الْقَلَمْ أَنْفَعُ الْأَقْلَامِ بَعْدَ قَلَمِ طِبِّ الْأَدْيَانِ. So after the pen of the medicine of religion, the Tibb al-Adyan, which is the pen which relates to the Quran and its revelation, and the pens of the scholars and the jurists who convey that is medicine of the Tibb al-Adyan, the religious medicine. And then the next best thing is the pen of the bodily medicine. He says, and the people's need of it is in accordance with necessity. Then he moves on to the fifth pen, Al-Qalam al-Khamis, Qalam al-Tawqi' anil muluki wa nuwabihim wa bihi tusasul mamalik. The fifth pen is the pen which is delegated, the delegates of the kings and their delegates, meaning those who sign in relation to governing the affairs of the people, by which the politics and the affairs of the people are governed, by which the subjects are governed, the pen which signs off the issues of rulership and governance. So those who share with the kings in regulating their states and their countries, then this pen belongs to them. If their pens are rectified, then the mamlaka, then the rulership of the governance will be rectified. And if their pens are corrupt, then this governance will be corrupt, this state will be corrupt. So this pen now deals with how the affairs of people are governed. The pens which are basically the administrative affairs, the affairs of rulership, the affairs of politics, economy, and so on and so forth. There are pens which govern these affairs. If that pen is upright, then that governance, that state will be upright. This is the fifth pen. The sixth pen is Qalamul Hisab. This is the pen of accounting, of weights and measures. It is the pen by which the wealth which is between the people, it is made exact, how much it is. And, the dealings which take place between the people. This pen, it is built upon as-sidq wal-adal. In the affairs of rizq and mal, sustenance, provision, and the dealings between the people, the pen, it should be founded upon sidq and adal, on truthfulness and justice. And if this pen, if this qalam lies, if the pen which relates to al-hisab, accounting, measure, if this pen lies and it oppresses, fasada amrul mamlaka, then the affairs in the state will become corrupt. So look at how things are dependent upon the pen. The rulership, the administration of the state, and then the accounting between the people, which is their rizq, their sustenance, and the affairs of mal. If the pen lies, then the affairs become corrupt. Then he says, the seventh pen, al-qalam al-sabi'. This now is the qalam al-hukm allati tuthbatu bihi al-huquq. This now is the executive pen, the pen now that actually commands things to be carried out. The executive pen. This is when this pen is tied to pen number 3, the pen of the scholars, the pen of the muftis, the pen of the jurists, because that pen, it conveys the ruling of Allah Azza wa Jal. So it says that the ruling in such and such is this, is such and such. But this pen is the executive pen. It makes sure that the hukum is carried out. It is performed. So this pen is the pen by which blood is spilt, by which wealth is taken from the one who was transgressive, and it is given to the one whose right it was. This is that pen. This is the pen by which arguments are ended, and by which disputes in terms of relationship and inheritance and so on and so forth, by which disputes are ended. This is that pen. This is the pen of al-hukm, which implements the ruling, and it is connected to pen number 3. And that's why, as you see in the law, as Sheikh Muhammad Aman al-Jami, he explains that in the law there is the judiciary, there is that which establishes the laws, the rulings, and there is the executive branch, that which implements the actual laws. And so here this pen is qalamul hukm. And then he continues and he says, al-qalam thamin, the 8th pen, qalamu shahada. It is the pen of witness and testifying, of testimony. This pen is the pen, meaning when people give their witnesses and testimonies, on this pen are the rights of people protected. And by way of this testimony, we believe the truthful person is believed, and the sinful lying person is disbelieved. And by way of this pen, the one who has a right, we witness that that right belongs to him. And the one who is mubtil, who is upon falsehood, then we invalidate his falsehood. This witness, this pen of witness, it preserves and protects blood and wealth and the relations between the private, the relations, the furuj, and the ansab, the relationships and the rights. When this pen is treacherous, as in when someone gives a treacherous, incorrect witness, a false testimony, then the affair of the world will become corrupt. So a lot hinges upon this pen. Upon this pen, the pen of testimony. And when this pen is upright, when the people's testimonies are upright, then the affair of the world will be upright. And this pen of testimony is built upon ilm wa adam al-kitman. It is built upon knowledge and not concealing knowledge. Then he goes on to the pen, which is number 9 in order. القلم التاسع قلم التعبير وهو كاتب وحي المنام وتفسيره وتعبيره وما أريد به. This now is the pen of the expression of the dreams. the dreams that people have, and the explanation of those dreams, what is intended by those dreams. He says, this pen, وَهُوَ قَلَمٌ شَرِيفٌ جَلِيلٌ. This is a noble pen. It is something that explains what is inspired to the people in their dreams. It reveals that. It is from those pens by which the dunya and the deen can be rectified. This pen requires tahara. The person has to have purity and amana, trustworthy. He has to be a truthful person, and he has to follow praiseworthy ways. He has to have deeply rooted knowledge. His inward has to be clean and pure, and he has to be guided by the divine light. And he has to have knowledge of the creation, the people and their states and conditions. So all of this is required by the person who is going to implement this pen, meaning explaining the dreams of the people. These are the qualities a person has to have. Truthful, honest, guided by divine light, always having amana, trustworthy, having deep-rooted knowledge of the religion, of the texts. This is the type of person that undertakes this pen. He says this pen is from the most altaf, the most latif of pens, the most subtle of pens, and it is something that is used to relate to basically all of the things which exist in the high heavens, in the lowest places, in the past, in the present, in the future. So then he moves on to the next pen, which is the 10th pen, and he says this is the pen of history. Al-Qalam al-Ashir قلم تواريخ العالم ووقائه. The pen of the history of the world and of the various events that take place in the world. This pen is the pen that basically تضبط به الحوادث, meaning the pen by which the events, historical events, are made exact, and how they are narrated from one nation to another nation, from one generation to another generation. And so everything which has happened in the world, they are moved away from the imagination and they are made concrete in the soul, until it is as if the one who listens, he is actually seeing what took place. So this is the nature of this pen. It takes what only exists in the imagination, it brings it back into life as if a person is seeing it, feeling it and observing it. This is the pen of history. This is the pen of history. And he says, وَهُوَ قَلَمُ الْمَعَادِ الرُّوحَانِ. This qalam, قَلَمُ الْعَجَائِبِ, it is the pen which has strange and amazing things, because it brings back the world, which is in the form of just imagination, and it brings it back as if you see it with your heart, and as if you see it with your vision. This is the pen of history. So this is the pen. When we read the history books and we read stories, it brings back and it makes them vivid in our imagination. And we see them and we feel them and we experience those historical events. This is the pen of history. It brings history back to life. Then the 11th pen is the pen of language. قلم اللغة وتفاصيلها من شرح معاني ألفاظها المفردة ونحوها وتصريفها وأسرار تراكيبها. This pen is the pen of language, and the details of the language, whether the words are individual words, the grammatical states of those words, the morphology of those words, the secrets in how those words are combined, composed, and whatever follows on from all of that, and the different types of meanings they indicate and how they indicate those meanings. All of this is from this pen, and this pen is vast indeed, and it has many different forms and types. So this is the pen of language, the pen of expression of language itself. And so here is an indication of studying the language, the Arabic language, and its various sciences. Then he comes to the final pen, and look at how amazing what he mentions as the final pen. And only a person of the Sunnah will find delight in the 12th pen. He says, Al-Qalam Athani Ashar. Al-Qalamul Jami'. This is the all-encompassing, comprehensive pen. وَهُوَ قَلَمُ الرَّدِّ عَلَى الْمُبْطِلِينَ. This is the pen of refuting the falsifiers. وَرَفْعِ سُنَّةِ الْمُحِقِّينَ. And raising the sunnah of the muhiqqeen, the sunnah of those who are upon truth and correct. وَكَشْفِ أَبَاطِيلِ الْمُبْطِلِينَ. And exposing the falsehoods of the people of falsehood. على اختلاف أنواعها وأجناسها. Upon all of their various types and categories. وبيان تناقضهم. And explaining their contradictions. وتحافتهم. And their, invalidating their falsehoods. وخروجهم عن الحق. And their departure from the truth. ودخولهم في الباطل. And them entering into falsehood. So this pen is the pen of refutation. The pen of refuting every single batil in all of its types and forms, its inherent contradiction, its departure from the truth, its entrance into falsehood. وَهَذَا الْقَلَمُ فِي الْأَقْلَامِ نَظِيرُ الْمُلُوكِ فِي الْأَنَامِ. This pen, the status of this pen, compared to all other pens, is like the relationship between the kings amongst all of the people. Just like a king is amongst the people, the subjects, then this pen of refutation is like all of the pens. This is the relationship of the pen of refutation towards all of the pens. وَأَصْحَابُهُ أَهْلُ الْحُجَّةِ النَّاسِرُونَ لِمَا جَاءَتْ بِهِ الرُّسُلُ. The people of this pen, the pen of refutation, they are the ones who are the aiders of what the messengers brought. Al-muharibun li'a'da'ihim, who wage war against the enemies of the messengers. وَهُمُ الدَّاعُونَ إِلَى اللَّهِ بِالْحِكْمَةِ وَالْمَوْعِظَةِ الْحَسَنَةِ. They are the ones who call to Allah with wisdom and with good admonition. Meaning the pen of refutation. The pen which is refuting every falsehood. They are the ones who call to Allah with wisdom and with good admonition. Al-mujadiluna liman kharaja an sabilihi bi anwa'il jidal. They argue with those who departed from the path of Allah with numerous types of argumentation. وَأَصْحَابُ هَذَا الْقَلَمْ حَرْبٌ لِكُلِّ مُبْدِلٍ. The people of this pen, they are a war against every mubtil, every falsifier. عَدُوٌ لِكُلِّ مُخَالِفٍ لِلرُّسُلِ. They are the enemy of every opposer to the messengers. فَهُمْ فِي شَأْنٍ. They are engaged in one affair. وَغَيْرُهُمْ مِنْ أَصْحَابِ الْأَقْلَامِ فِي شَأْنٍ. And the people of other pens are in some other affair. Meaning to emphasize the status of the people of this type of pen. So then he says, فَهَذِهِ الْأَقْلَامُ الَّتِي بِهَا انْتِظَامُ مَسَالِهِ الْعَالَمِ. And this was the title of the lecture. So these are the pens, these 12 pens, these are the ones which arrange the affairs, the beneficial affairs of the world. And sufficient it is to indicate the loftiness of the pen in that the books of Allah were not written except by way of the pen. This is the lofty status of the pen. The books of Allah were written by the pen. Allah swore by it in His book. And He informed others that He taught by way of the pen. And that what reached us from His Prophet ﷺ was by way of the pen. And so all of this discussion that Ibn al-Qayyim has brought here is indicating the nature of the oath, the nature of what Allah swore by. Allah swore by the pen. And all of these are the different types of pen. Now, let's come to the point in this surah, in the beginning part of this surah. Ibn al-Qayyim says, وَالْمُقْسَمُ عَلَيْهِ بِالْقَلَمِ وَالْكِتَابَةِ فِي هَذِهِ السُّورَةِ. So what is it? What is the thing for which Allah Azza wa Jal is swearing by the pen? And this pen, we've seen the greatness of this pen. and how many types of pen. What is it that Allah Azza wa Jal is swearing by? What's the reason? It is مَا أَنْتَ بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ بِمَجْنُونَ. It is to exonerate His messenger from the claim that he is majnoon, that he is mad. And Ibn al-Qayyim says that when you think about these two things, the claim that the messenger is mad and possessed, majnoon, and the swearing by way of the pen, what's the connection between these two things? What is the connection? What is the suitability of swearing by this thing in order to establish this thing? What's the connection? And he says, when you put these two things together, the qasam wal muqsamu bihi, when you put the two things together, the thing that is being sworn by and the thing that is being sworn for, when you put them together, you will find that it indicates this objective in the most clearest of ways. Because, he says, when a person writes with a pen something from any of the sciences, which the people then take from him, then this cannot come from a majnoon. We all know this. When a person authors a book on a science amongst the sciences, this book then is spread. People take that book from him. They benefit from that book. This book cannot come from a majnoon. We know this from experience. This book can only come from one who has aql, wafir. He has sufficient, abundant intellect. So if this is something that we know and we understand, then how can that which is in the Quran, that which the messenger came with, which is the greatest of ranks, the greatest of ulum, how can then that come from a majnoon? If we accept and understand that a man who authors on any science that is taken by the people, acted upon, benefited from, and they agree that this man wrote this book with knowledge and ilm and aql and so on and so forth, if that is the case, then how can that which came from the messenger of this book, which is of the greatest rank, how can that come from him? How can that come from a majnoon? How can such a thing, whose sciences, it is not possible for any human to come with the sciences that are found in this book, or which emanate from this book. How can a man who is ummi, he is unlettered, he does not even write a book, he does not know how to write or read, and he did not write it with his own right hand, yet he is the one who is the most eloquent. A man who can't read, can't write, but he is the most eloquent. There is no ikhtilaf in his speech. There is no tanaqud in his speech. There's no contradiction. How can it be possible for no intelligent person or groups of intelligent can come together in a single place and they are able to bring the likes of it? They are not able to do this. If all of the uqala of the world were to come together, they would not be able to bring the likes of this. So in other words, alongside all of this, how can the Quran come from a majnoon? How can the Quran come from a majnoon? This is impossible. And so this means that this is from the most evil of buhtan. It is the most clear fabrication and lie that there can ever be. So this is the connection between swearing by the qalam and by proving that the messenger of Allah is not majnoon. Then he says, so reflect upon this shahada, reflect upon this testimony. And then he continues and he goes on to explain, and he says that if a man was to come along and he was to write a risala, an excellent risala, arranged from its beginning to its end, in conformity with each other. He wrote a poem, a long poem, or he wrote a book, then every intelligent person would ascribe to him aql. He would say, this man is an intelligent person. No one would accuse him of being mad. And this is alongside the fact that because this human wrote it, we are able to oppose it, we're able to contradict it, we are able to criticize it, we are able to so on and so forth, we are able to bring something equal to it, we are able to mimic it, what he brought. Alongside all of this, no one would say this man is mad, rather he would say this man has aql. So how then can the one who brought the Quran, which no one is able to bring the likes of it, no one is able to oppose, how can someone bring the likes of this accusation? This is impossible. This is impossible. And so then he goes on to say, he develops the argument even further now. He says, we find that the followers of this Quran, which is made of these huruf, they are the most intelligent of all people without exception. Look, you can see, here are their books. Look at all the sciences that come from the Quran. You can see all of their books. For example, the books of tafsir, the books in every single science, in language, in fiqh, in tafsir, in everything you think of it, there are sciences which are being written. And it is sufficient that you reflect that these people who inherited these sciences, they went to all parts of the world, they inhabited those parts of the world, they established schools, they taught sciences, they brought the people out of darkness into light, they established ilm, they established adl, they filled the hearts with iman, with taqwa. How can the one who's followed in all of this be majnoon? In other words, when you look at what the Sahaba, when they took ilm to all the different places, to Sham, to Iraq, to Misr, to North Africa, and going towards the east in the other direction, Khurasan, all the way. How can those who fill the earth with all of this, how could they be following one who is majnoon? How does that make sense? How does that even make sense? They are the a'qal, they are the most intelligent of people. His followers, they are the most intelligent of people without exception. These are the Sahaba and whoever followed them upon that. So all of this, how did this happen? This is because of the ni'mah of Allah Azza wa Jal upon His servant. And that's why Allah Azza wa Jal, He said, مَا أَنْتَ بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ بِمَجْنُونَ. And then he goes on, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he then says, he informs his messenger that indeed he will have the best of reward. وَإِنَّ لَكَ لَأَجْرًا غَيْرَ مَمْنُونَ. Meaning that you will have a reward which will never ever cut off. It is limitless. Then he comes to the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَىٰ خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. Indeed you are upon a mighty khuluq, meaning manners, morals, conduct. Ibn al-Qayyim says this is from the greatest of the signs of his nubuwwah, that we see what the messenger was upon in his khuluq, in his mannerisms, in his behavior, in his characteristics. This is from the greatest of the signs of his actual prophethood and his messengership. This is a proof for us of his, truthfulness of his prophethood. And al-Mu'mineen Aisha radiallahu anha was asked about his khuluq. She gave an answer with what is sufficient. Bima shafa wa kafa, which is sufficient. She said, Kana khuluquhu al-Qur'an. So when the questioner, who asked this question, when he heard this answer, he immediately understood. He stood and left without even needing to ask anything else because he immediately understood the answer. Ibn al-Qayyim says also, the word ad-deen can also be called khuluq. Because the khuluq, so in other words, religion can also be called khuluq, meaning mannerisms, behavior, so on and so forth. Why? Because then he goes on to explain. The khuluq are basically a form, an outward form you see from a person. What does it come from? It comes from knowledge, types of knowledge that a person has, and iradat, wishes that a person has, which are zakiyah, which are pure. These then lead outwardly to actions which are in accordance with wisdom and with justice. And so when all of this comes together, then outwardly we see statements and actions which a person makes. They come from those inward sciences and desires. So khuluq is like basically the religion, the whole of the religion. So Ibn al-Qayyim makes that connection. And so he says, therefore, when it is said, كَانَ خُلُقُهُ الْقُرْآنِ, basically it means the whole religion that he was upon was basically the Qur'an itself. And so his akhlaq, his mannerisms, they were taken from the light of the Qur'an. His speech was in agreement with the Qur'an. It was an explanation of the Qur'an. His sciences that he brought were from the sciences of the Qur'an. His desires, his iradat, they were the very iradat that were mentioned in the Qur'an or commanded in the Qur'an. His actions were the ones which the Qur'an obligated and recommended. And whenever he turned away from something or abandoned something, they were the things that Allah ordered to be abandoned. Whenever he aspired for something, had a raghbah for something, it was that which the Qur'an created raghbah for. Whenever he was abstinent from something, it is what the Qur'an ordered to be abstinent from. Whatever he disliked, it was what the Qur'an made to be dislikable. Whatever he loved, it was what the Qur'an made to be loved, and so on and so forth. So meaning, the messenger in everything he did, he was basically the Qur'an. The Qur'an, his khuluq were from the Qur'an. They were taken from the Qur'an. So Ummul Mu'mineen Aisha radiallahu anha, she explained his khuluq by way of the Qur'an. Kana khuluquhu al-Qur'an, and the questioner immediately understood. So, to conclude then, we come to the end of our discussion then. So when the akhlaq of the servants, their sciences, their iradat, their actions are all taken from the qalam. From the qalam and what they write. And when the creation of the qalam itself, that Allah created the pen, and this is from the greatest of the favors of Allah Azza wa Jal, that He created the pen which wrote the decrees, the pen which wrote the revelation, and so on and so forth, and all the other types of pens. Then how can the people reject the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal bestowed upon them a favor by sending the messenger of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and his akhlaq and the ulum and the a'mal and the iradat, all of that which came from the Qur'an, which came by way of the pen, which came by way of the huruf. How can they reject all of this? All of this is the greatest of the signs of the nubuwwah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All of this is the greatest evidence that he was truthful in his messengership. And so this leads nicely to the next part of the verse, or the next verses which occur in this surah, in which Allah Azza wa Jal, and we come to the end now, when He said, فَسَتُبْصِرُ وَيُبْصِرُونَ بِأَيِّكُمُ الْمَفْتُونَ. Soon you shall know, and they too shall know. Which of the two is in fact maftoon? And so Ibn al-Qayyim says that indeed the enemies of Allah's messenger who denied him, they will know who is maftoon. And in fact, some of them have already known that in the life of this world. And others, when they went to the barzakh, that knowledge increased. They now know even more who was truly maftoon. And then in the hereafter, it will become even more apparent to them who was maftoon. And this will be when all of the creation will come to know as a matter of fact these realities, about the message of the Messenger of Allah. So then at the end, we finish here with this ayah, بِأَيِّكُمُ الْمَفْتُونَ. You will soon come to know which of the two of you will be, who of you was put to trial. So this brings us to the end of the commentary of Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah ta'ala. And so from this, there are many benefits, I hope, that we have taken from this, from the great favors and bounties of Allah Azza wa Jal, that we are able to speak. The huruf, this in itself is a great and mighty thing by which Allah Azza wa Jal, He swears by in the Qur'an. And from that also, the claim that was made against the Messenger of Allah that he is majnoon, and the falsification of this claim by connecting the qalam with the fact that the Messenger is not majnoon, rather he is the a'qal, he is the most intelligent of all of mankind. And that this qalam, by way of which come the revelation, which is the Qur'an, that from this Qur'an and what it brought about in the Messenger of Allah in all of his akhlaq, his khuluq, there is a sign of his prophethood and a sign of his intelligence. So all of these things are great and mighty affairs which need to be reflected upon. So perhaps we have taken some benefit from the words of Shaykh al-Sa'di and Ibn al-Qayyim. May Allah reward them greatly and have mercy upon them. And with that we conclude our lecture there today. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.